Today I'll be interviewing Jerry Georgiadis. He's a suicide prevention researcher. We'll be talking about the alarming statistics around death of both natural and unnatural causes within the prison system and within custody.
The suicide rates in the prison system are extraordinarily high, particularly for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, the First Nations people of this country. Suicide rates for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in general are an abomination, morally, political and otherwise. They're a humanitarian crisis. 1 in 10 of all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander deaths is a suicide. In prison, it's actually extraordinarily high. It's actually much higher though post-release. You're up to 10 times more likely to lose your life to an unnatural death, suicide in particular, or substance misuse, or risk-taking in the first year post-release from prison than while actually in prison. We've had this focus on suicides and unnatural deaths in prison, and that focus should remain. We should also have a focus on what happens to people post-release. People have gone into prison, in general come out worse than what they went in. That situational trauma of prison, incarceration, degenerates to a constancy of trauma, multiple and composite, and often for many, sadly, tragically, degenerates to aggressive complex trauma, sometimes irrecoverable.
You can't talk about incarceration of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples without talking about deaths in custody and the alarming number of Aboriginal people who have died in custody since. We're not only talking about the number of people that died before the Royal Commission, but also since the Royal Commission into Aboriginal deaths in custody, and the fact that the majority of the 339 recommendations made up by the Commission have not been implemented.
The highest rate of deaths in custody and the highest total of deaths in terms of numbers of people lost, deaths in custody, particularly in police watch houses, is Western Australia. And the majority of deaths are unnatural, and suicides in police watch houses and in prisons in Western Australia are of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, of the First Nations people of this state. If you are born black in Western Australia, you have a 2 in 3 chance of living poor your whole life. If you're born black in the Northern Territory, you have a 3 in 4 chance of living below the poverty line or living poor your whole life. So that translates toxically as racism. We haven't done the investment in the ways forward, in the redress, in the remedies and in the affirmative actions that should have been done long ago, particularly when we came out of the apartheid practices of this country. And Western Australia is worse than the rest of this nation. Western Australia is the mother of all jailers of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. 1 in 13 of Aboriginal adult males is in prison today in Western Australia. 1 in 13. That competes with the African American jail rate. Western Australia is the mother of all jailers of Aboriginal people, not just in Australia, but around the world from that racialised lens. And in our police watch houses, nearly 100% of the deaths in police watch houses, which are usually individuals are detained between 24 to 96 hours before being moved to a prison custodial setting, nearly 100% of those deaths in Western Australian police watch houses are of our black brothers and sisters.
These are alarming statistics, Jerry. What do you feel needs to happen? Is there a reform that needs to come in, or what have we seen since the last reform, perhaps?
There's one particular reform that needs to actually be kept as a promise. This incoming government, now is the incumbent government, at the State Labor Conference in June of 2015, committed to the Custody Notification Service, a life-saving service that costs less than $500,000, the cost of a coronial inquiry, less than $500,000, the cost of misused coronial inquiry exceeded $1 million. This shouldn't be about what's cost aversive, or it should not be about the money. It should not be about the money. In New South Wales and the ACT since 2000, there's been the Custody Notification Service, which was born out of a recommendation from the Royal Commission to Aboriginal Deaths in Custody, 1987-1991, tabled in 1992, the final report. That service has led to 100% reduction to zero deaths in police watch houses of First Nations peoples, First Nations detainees. A similar policy needs to be had in Western Australia, and if we can go anywhere near that zero death rate or zero deaths in police watch houses in Western Australia, we will be doing a good thing all around, not just for the community, not just for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander brothers and sisters who foremost this should be done for, and for their families, too many who grieve in that sea of grief, but also for the police. The police need to be relieved of the burden of making health and welfare and legal judgments that aren't their call.
Bas Tadros for Undercurrent.